Welcome to this event. My name is Nuria Casas and I work at ACR Plus, the Association of Cities and Regions for Sustainable Resource Management. Today I will be moderating this event on breaking down legal uncertainties to circular procurement. This event is being organized by the CIPRON initiative, which is coordinated by ACR Plus and Rex Waterstadt. For those who don't know, CIPRON is an initiative that aims to be a one-stop shop for circular procurement and aims to gather different projects, ongoing initiatives, and relevant documents on the field of circular procurement. And it has three main aims: facilitate the exchange of information, create a body of knowledge, and provide policy insights. We will share with you the link to the CIPRON initiative, and we encourage you to register to be up to date of the activities ongoing on circular procurement and to be part of the community as well. Some housekeeping rules. The event, as you see, is being recorded, and it will be available on the CIPRON website after the event, together with the presentations from speakers. So now we move to the agenda. So we will start with the short poll to get to know your insights on the topic. And this will help us for the discussion that will take part after the presentations. So we will have three presentations. The first one from Jonas Borter from the University of Hassel, from directives to practice, interpreting and implementing green public procurement across EU member states. This will be followed by a presentation from Evelyn Bakker from Circu Law, supporting policymakers, project leaders, and buyers in better using regulations to advance the circular economy. And then we have Joanna Rourke from Dublin City Council that will present green public procurement in Ireland and Dublin City case study. After that, we will have a panel discussion and Q&A and closing. I forgot to mention that if you have questions, please write them in the chat and they will be addressed after the presentations. So now if we can launch the poll. So, sorry. So the first question: to what extent do you think the legal framework prevents public buyers from implementing circular procurement in your country? If you can please submit your answer. Yeah. So we see that most voted options are slightly and moderately. So yeah, this means that it makes sense to organize the event on this topic. So second question is, has your organization ever avoided circular procurement due to legal concerns? So more from a practical side. Here we see, no, I'm not sure. And one yes. Okay. Okay. And then if we move to the third question. In your view, what aspects of the EU public procurement directives should be clarified or strengthened to better promote circular procurement? And here we mentioned some examples, can be others. Could be monitoring, market engagement, the use of labels, SME participation, the prioritization of local suppliers or procurement procedures, for example. Yeah, we see market engagement and monitoring so far. Maybe we can wait a little bit. Yeah, now they are coming. Yeah, we see flexible procedures, restrictions and possibilities, sectoral legislation. Oh, some Dutch word that I don't understand. Remanufactured products, products or requirements, and local suppliers also mentioned. SMEs participation, GPP training. Okay. Yeah, this thing. Okay. Can wait 30 seconds more maybe and then close the poll. Yeah, I think we can close the poll there. Thanks a lot. Okay. For respondents, market engagement. Okay. Great. So now we can move to the presentations. I will give the floor to Jonas Borter. So Jonas studied law at Hassel University. He acquired his first professional experience by working as an attorney at a boutique law firm in Hassel. In 2019, he chose for an academic journey and started a PhD research at Hassel University on the legal transition towards the circular economy in the construction sector in Belgium. He successfully defended his PhD in June 2023 after working as a postdoctoral researcher at Tilburg University. He's now affiliated at Hassel University as an assistant professor of environmental law. His main area of work is the legal transition to a circular economy in various economic sectors with a specific interest in waste, innovative materials, soil, and urban planning. He's also a member of the Flemish Circular Economy Policy Research Center. So, Jonas, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. Very nice to meet you all. And I'm more than happy to talk with you about how EU member states are interpreting and implementing green public procurement practices. But before we can dive into the EU member states, let's take a look at the European level first. When we talk about public procurement legislation, the one that is the most important, there are others, of course, as well, is Directive 2014/24 of the EU. And we're not going to go through it. That would be very boring, I presume. But overall, this text, this legal text, actually provides public buyers with a lot of instruments, tools, and principles that they can use to implement green, social, sustainable or circular criteria, specification, and clauses. So the tools are actually there. It says how, or it teaches us how public buyers should buy. It doesn't say anything about what they should buy. We can find some links to what public buyers should buy in specific thematic or sectoral European legislation. This is an excerpt from the new eco-design regulation, where Article 65 actually specifically mentions green public procurement. It not only mentions it, it also says that it will establish obligatory minimum requirements that will be set considering environmentally sustainable products. So you see the tools are in Directive 2014-24, but thematic legislation that is actually hinting on what contracting authorities or public buyers should buy. Another example is Directive 2009-33 on the promotion of clean road transport vehicles, which was amended in 2019, that now in Article 5 also mentions the idea of minimum procurement targets. So we have the tools, we have the targets on the European level. So actually, I could have stopped my presentation here. All the necessary tools are in place, but they gave me 15 minutes. So let's talk a little bit more about the implementation of those European tools, instruments, principles, provisions into the member states, because there is a discrepancy between them. Some use a different approach towards including green, circular, or social criteria into their public procurement practices than others. These are the countries that I will be talking about. We have the Netherlands, Spain, Italy, and Belgium. I actually wanted to change those pictures, those standard pictures, to the pictures of the Eurovision Song Contest contestants of the different countries. But as Belgium didn't make it to the grand final, I was too sad to change it. So we have to do it with these pictures. These are the countries that we'll look into, just to specifically see if they have a specific idea or a specific method that could be some kind of inspiration for us all. I didn't do it now solely because of the presentation. It's actually based on a report that we wrote for the Circular Economy Center, which is actually funded by the Flemish government and supports policy relevant research on circular economy practices. And there we really delved into that idea of green public procurement and the circular economy, and we highlighted some interesting practices in the various countries. So what will I be talking about? I already spent 5 of the minutes that was given to me. So we're going to focus on technical specifications and award criteria solely. We first look at the European perspective, and then we highlight some interesting cases of the various member states. There is a big arrow at the bottom. It is there because there is always an interplay between the technical specifications and the award criteria, and we will see that as well when we discuss the various initiatives in those European member states. But first, the technical specifications. Now, when we look at Directive 2014-24 again, we can find most of the rules on technical specifications in Article 42 of the directive. We can call technical specifications the so-called must-haves. So it's the bar that every interesting party must get over in order to get the contract awarded. If you don't meet the requirements, you can't get the contract. Of course, the directive meets or has specific conditions in place that have to be met when you want to include some technical specifications into your public tender. For example, it has to relate to the subject matter of the contract, which already highlights that it's very important to be well prepared as a public buyer or a contracting authority, because if you can already see or say, okay, my contract, my idea has some circularity ambitions involved, that means that the technical specifications can also relate to green or circular ambitions. Is there any room for circularity, green, social clauses? Yes, of course. Like I said in the beginning, the directive is an instrumental directive, so it focuses on tools or instruments, but it highlights the idea that you can include green or social clauses within those technical specifications. There are various pathways that you can explore when you want to include technical specifications. In Italy, they've chosen the path of mandatory environmental criteria. So on the government level, on the regulatory level, some specific specifications were made for various sectors, and they are mandatory. This is an example that I put in the presentation that is related to urban furniture. This is the part on technical specification, but there is an interplay because it also includes a part on award criteria or contract clauses, but this is mandatory. This is mandatory, which sounds like a very good idea, but what the research shows is that Italy also needs a very big legal apparatus in order to enforce those idea of mandatory environmental criteria. And it also needs to invest a lot in education of smaller local communities, smaller local contracting authorities that have to take those mandatory environmental criteria into account. So it's not like, okay, we just put them in and then everything will be solved. There also needs it needs some accompanying measures to really get into practice. Spain takes a slightly different approach because Spain has a very specific state structure with a national level and autonomous regional communities. So you get some kind of scattered legislation, but they're all equally ambitious. So they're very ambitious when you're talking about circular economy objectives, environmental clauses, environmental ideas, but it's less concrete, it's less mandatory than Italy because it has a comply or explain mechanism. So it's very ambitious. They want every contracting authority to be very ambitious, but if they cannot be ambitious because they are too small, because there are some other reasons that might be there, they can explain why they choose not to comply to the ambitious targets set for it in the legislation. So those are already two very different approach. This is more of a nudging approach, and the Italy example shows more obligatory measures. Considering the award criteria then. The award criteria are mentioned in Article 67 of Directive 2014-24, and when the technical specifications are the must-haves, these are the nice-to-haves. So this is where you score points, this is where you get the contract awarded. It follows the meat approach, so you have to choose the most economically advantageous tender, and you can choose the most meaty option using three possible routes. You can focus on price alone, on costs alone, or on the best price quality ratio. Those are the options put forward in the directive. Let's look at the Netherlands then. The Netherlands, or the regulatory framework in the Netherlands, also highlights those three options, but includes some kind of comply or explain mechanism. To better put it, it's a duty to motivate. So what does the regulatory framework in the Netherlands says? Okay, you have price, cost, or best price quality ratio, but if you want to use price as a sole criterion or cost as a sole criterion, you have to motivate that choice. And that is, again, a nudging practice because, well, contracting authorities or public buyers are very scared of legal proceedings of the courts. So they want to take the easiest route. And if they don't have to motivate anything when they use the best price quality ratio, you actually nudge them into that direction. Now, what is the most circular approach? Is the best price quality ratio the most circular approach? I really like it because I think that from a circularity perspective, you need the qualitative criteria in order to enhance cooperation between all the construction actors or other actors that might be involved in a specific sector. Of course, life cycle costing, although not as popular as it could be right now because the methods are not really on point yet, but in the future, it might be the case that life cycle costing could be the method par excellence to really include circularity into public tenders. But right now, the Netherlands has a duty to motivate the use of price as a sole criterion or cost as a sole criterion. And then Belgium, the place to be, of course. We also include three options into our legislation: price, cost, price, quality ratio. We don't have any duty to motivate, but we have a specific state structure. Spain has a very interesting one. We even have a more interesting one. So the competences that are relevant for my presentation today are actually not on the same level. Public procurement is a national or a federal competence, while everything related to environmental matters, circularity, is mostly on the regional or the Flemish level. But luckily, there is an interplay between them. We have a so-called intra-Belgian platform, where we can discuss some possible ideas or some possible problems that might pop up because of that division of competences. And within the framework of that platform, we actually proposed to the regional and national authorities to also include a duty to motivate the use of price as a sole criterion in public procurement practices, because we believe anyway that price alone will almost never generate any circular solution. Some important thing that I want to highlight, or an interesting tool that I want to highlight from a Flemish Belgian perspective, is the so-called GRO. GRO works with specific criteria and attaches some ambition levels to it. So we have good, better, and excellent. And what you actually can do is in your technical specifications, you say, okay, every offer that you make needs to comply to the ambitions level of good on specific criteria, for example, acoustics, but also the environmental, the greenery around the building, or you name it, there are specific criteria in place. But then in the award criteria phase, you can also say, okay, you get more points the higher ambition level you reach with your offer. So there you see an interplay between the technical specifications and the award criteria. Technical specifications set the bar, and with award criteria, you can do better and get more points the better you do. To conclude then, I actually wanted to conclude with a question, because, well, the question is there a shift now from how to buy to what to buy? Like I said in the beginning, the European directive is an instrumental directive. It focuses on tools and practices, and actually everything is in place for us to be more circular. But we see in practice that we are not necessarily buying more circular in a very systemic way. So then the question pops up, do we need to focus and really regulate what public buyers should buy? And there we have to take into account the fact that the type of contracting authorities in Europe is very diverse, from very big spenders to very small communities. And we have to make sure that they still can align their ambitions of the public contracts with the local setting, with the local elements that are present when they are buying something, be it construction works, be it supplies, be it any services that they want to buy. So just making everything mandatory seems like a very good idea, but Italy shows that then you need a very big legal apparatus as well to enforce it. The nudging side might be a little bit more interesting because it gives some breathing space to the smaller ones. I don't have a definitive answer, but it's something that we definitely can discuss at the end of this session. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonas, for your presentation and all the insights you provided. Really relevant. Yes, you said if please, if any of you have any questions, write them in the chat. We will address them after the presentations. So yeah, now I would like to give the floor to Evelyn. So Evelyn Bakker is an experienced legal counsel. Her specialization are strategy, procurement, and contracting, specifically for sustainable, climate-neutral, positive, and circular development. Evelyn wants to contribute to a more sustainable living environment, one where the planet remains inhabitable for nature and people, now and in the future. So Evelyn, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Nuria. I'm just sharing my screen. I hope it all works out as we planned. I can't see you right now, so if you have a problem seeing my screen, please reach out. Then I'll try again. So yes, thank you for the introduction. I think it would be good to try to keep my presentation concise. I understand that the slides are being shared after the webinar, so please feel free to look at them more in depth and then come back to me if you have any questions. Maybe touching upon Circular. We are a public-private initiative started from the municipality of Amsterdam and several other public companies and also private companies, and we try to use the law as a way to stimulate the transition towards a more circular economy. So that's what we try to do. A large part of what we do is also trying to make laws and legislation a bit more attractive and concise. So that's why we've worked on analyzing the European Green Deal, and you see it here in the screen that I shared. What we did is to look at the European Green Deal. I think it's 170 pieces of legislation, and try to categorize them a bit more so that you can understand, if you work in, I don't know, consumer goods, what directives and what types of legislation are actually in place, and what do I need to look at going forward, maybe as a policy advisor or as a company working in one of those sectors. And what we see is that the legislation interrelates a lot. And that doesn't help in making it more understandable, but that's what we are. I think the European Green Deal really focuses on making a comprehensive economic growth instrument. So maybe it's from a more circularity point, not really focused on using all the different circular strategies, but more focused on trying to get the producers to produce more sustainable or better products. So that's basically what the European Green Deal is all about. And if we look at public procurement, I think that 40% of the legislation has some direct or indirect relationship with public procurement. And I'll get into my analysis here. So there are some general remarks. I think from the Commission standpoint, governments, and especially with their public procurement instruments and buying power, are giving the role of frontrunner and really addressing their role as a frontrunner in order to help the transition along. So that's why I think that's what I said earlier. I think that 40% number is a good indication of the importance of the buying power of governments. And it's up to us, I think, in trying to get those objectives and these goals really deep into the projects and public procurement that we can. So that's what we talk about. As you can see from the overview we made, the legislation is rolled out sector-specific or sometimes product-specific, which means that there are several really specific rules in place, for instance, for batteries, which do not really translate into national legislation nor in the national legal order. And I think, as Jonas said, if you look at procurement as a whole, you can see that the directive is implemented on different ways. That will also be the case for the sector-specific legislation. So it will become more of a puzzle. And that, I think, poses a challenge to every one of us, because we know it's coming, but we're not really quite sure what it means for the projects that we have. Transparency in products and value chains is a very important topic in trying to understand the Green Deal and the transition that the European Commission sees towards a more sustainable economy. However, now, of course, there is a discussion about the omnibus package, which drastically reduces its potential. And I think that's also true for public procurement, because earlier we thought it's great to have a universal language of what sustainability is and how we can actually use the same indicators throughout businesses and governments in order to measure and really monitor and follow up on the transition. That's well, I'm sure you've all seen it. The omnibus package will be drastically reduced, but it's still important to look at the way we use the data that will become available in public procurement. And I think Jonas addressed it already. within this sector-specific approach, there is also the introduction of the minimum requirements and the role of the European Commission by setting these standards through delegated acts. So in several pieces of legislation, we can see that this framework has been established, but it's now unclear how the European Commission will set the standards and try to turn the knob on the ambitions of these standards in order to maybe follow up on reaching the Paris goals. So that's one thing that you really should look into. And it's also a bit of a challenge because the legislation is not uniformly formed. So I have here the general text of the eco-design regulation, the one that Jonas just touched upon, and that's for various products. But if you look at the building products regulation, that you can see that even though the Commission is working on setting minimum standards, it's still possible for contracting authorities to establish more sustainable ambitions. And I think the CPR at least really invites all the public buyers to really try to do that. But it's difficult to translate this ambition and this statement into practical uses. And of course, it's also really relevant to look at the involvement of case law and the implications that the case law has, because we all talk about the obligations of national governments, but also of cities and regions, and how we should really interpret case law that we have. And there was a really important case, the Klimasynerune case last year by the European Court of Human Rights, and it actually imposed or affirmed the obligation that the governments have on all levels to actively fight against climate change and also adapt climate adaptation measures. And I think that's a really good way of looking at public procurement as a whole. This obligation touches upon human rights, so it's really a key issue, and these it also hands out a pretty important overview of the obligations that you need to really try to implement in order to achieve the goals for the Paris Agreement. And it also includes the setting of a timeline for CO2 neutral and the remaining CO2 budget, intermediate goals. So we'll talk about that in a minute for Ireland. But I think it's good to try to make sure that we keep that in mind if we look at all the challenges that we see in public procurement, because it also gives you and your organizations a pathway towards implementing all these circular initiatives. So that was more of what is happening in the world, and now we did a case on food waste, and let me just walk you through some things that we found in our analysis and the way we can incorporate the reduction of food waste in public procurement. You see here we made an analysis of the impact of food waste. It's pretty big. As you may or may not know already, 1/3 of all the food worldwide is lost or wasted. So it is an important issue. And how can we translate this into practice? And if we made an analysis of the complete value chains of the food sector and trying to assess what is the impact of every actor in this sector and who has the responsibility to reduce it. And we dived here a bit deeper into the hospitality sector, and what we see here is pretty I think interesting, because what we see, for instance, if you look at buffets, they are responsible for 20 to 50% of food waste. So if you look at your own hospitality service, and maybe buffets are not the way to go, but of course it's good to look at that. And portion size is also really a big cause of the food waste that we have. So if you know that, then of course you can really address your own public procurement procedure in a way to battle these difficulties or issues that we see in the sector. We made legal instruments. You can check the website and you see where they are, and we try to touch upon as many subjects as we can. So you see here, we look at policy, we look at special procedures, we look at selection or award criteria and contract requirements, and we try to help and maybe uniform the way that we as public buyers set standards and formulate the questions that we can ask the market. And just to wrap it up, 2 examples of 2 cities in the Netherlands who have actually looked at this hospitality issue with the issues that we just addressed. And they introduced a mixed bag of award criteria, selection criteria, and also demands. And you can see what they did here. For instance, the city of Amersfoort is really interesting because they really focused on protein transition in the tender, and they asked the market to set forth an offer really based on the objective that the city of Amersfoort has. So they said this is the objective we have. You as a market or as a catering company have all the knowledge and expertise in helping us how to really reach these goals, and how does that work? Please help us in order to try to stimulate what we have. And you see here what they got. They had sort of a growth period. So they set goals, for instance, for 80% plant-based food after a period of 3 years, because they argued that it would be good for people using the hospitality service to get used to it a bit more, and slowly assessing or changing the way that the meals are being presented to a more plant-based and less wasteful environment. And that was really successful. And I think what we try to do with Circulo is really introducing all these objectives and setting examples of where these instruments have actually been used so that others can benefit from that. I think the only way that we can work towards the Paris goals or the CO2 emission reduction is really to try to unify our powers as public buyers by what we ask the market, so that they have also a really interesting driver to try to invest and make sure that their own businesses are actually turned towards a more circular way of thinking and business model. So yeah, I think that would be it from me, because I can talk about this a long time, but maybe it's best to hand over the presentation to the next speaker.
Yeah, thanks so much, Evelyn, for your presentation. So now we move to Joanna Ruka. Joanna has worked in the regional waste management planning offices in Ireland since 2016. Prior to this, her career of over 30 years included environmental science, communication, policy, research, and education. In her current role, she has led many national awareness and communication campaigns, as well as sustainability programs for citizens and business. Joanne holds a master in science communication, and her PhD focused on environmental risk communication, particularly in the area of waste management. She's interested in interdisciplinary collaboration to enact behavioral change and tackle environmental issues. So, Joanna, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nuri, for that kind introduction. Next slide, and we'll fly into it, because I realize I was very enthusiastic in making my slides and I may have too many. As Nuri said, I work in the Regional Waste Management Planning Office in Ireland, and we implement the National Waste Plan for a Circular Economy. And of course, green public procurement is key to building a circular economy. So although we are not one of the organizations who are really driving this within Ireland. We're an important stakeholder, and we are hoping to, push the local authority system along, because that's the system in which we actually reside. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to set the scene, in Ireland, the GPP definition we're using is the one that comes from the 2008 Public Procurement for a Better Environment from the European Commission. And it's a process whereby public bodies seek to procure goods, services, and works with a reduced environmental impact throughout their life cycle when compared to goods, services, and works in the same primary function that would otherwise be procured. So I suppose the important thing here, really, it's a very long definition, is that the green criteria that we use refers to the goods and services rather than the actual company, if you know what I mean, that we're sourcing goods and services from. So in Ireland, our approach to green public procurement is one of sort of sustainable public procurement. So this is where we seek to achieve an appropriate balance between the three pillars of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental, at all stages of the procurement process. And I'll explain that more as I go along. Next slide, please. So just to give you some context and set the scene, in Ireland, our government spends 22 billion each year. That accounts for 10 to 12% of our gross domestic product. That, of course, is quite a significant amount of money. And if the public sector actually moves some of its spending over to green public procurement, that can have a really big impact and can drive us towards a more circular economy. And we believe that the public sector must lead by example. We can't expect the private sector to start buying green if we're not doing it. And that green public procurement really is key to Ireland's transition to a green, low carbon, circular economy. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to give you a little idea of the policy progression in Ireland to date on GPP. So in 2012, an action plan was produced on green public procurement by the government. In 2014, following the EU directive, the EPA in Ireland published a green procurement guidance for public sector, and it has actually updated that document a number of times, as you can see here. In 2019, this is very important in terms of municipalities or local authorities. We have 31 local authorities in Ireland. In 2019, each of those signed a climate action charter, and that included a commitment to green procurement. So I suppose that's where our office comes in and trying to actually drive that commitment forward. In 2020, a government circular, so that's it. Our government circulars are just sort of a diktat from the government that the rest of the public service has to follow. So this instructed government departments to consider using green criteria in public procurement purposes. In 2021, the EPA published a new a guidance document for the public sector, and it included green public procurement guidance criteria for different sectoral groups and for different priority areas. And I'll go into that in more detail in a moment as well. And last year, a green public procurement strategy and action plan was produced by the government, and that is, sorry, I have a typo there. That's actually to last from 2024 to 2027. Okay, next slide, please. So the three organisations that are really leading green public procurement in Ireland in both terms of policy and practice are the Department of the Environment. So they set the policy and the strategy, and they also bring people together for dialogue and focus groups and things like that. The Environmental Protection Agency, so they are looking at the guidance. So they produce those guidance documents, for instance. They are also integral in producing and carrying out training for people who work in the public service, and they also, very importantly, report on our GPP progress. Also, the Office of Government Procurement. This is a central office that sets the rules for government procurement, but it also actually runs very big national tenders. But they're actually important in trying to integrate green public procurement into all of our procurement strategies and roadmaps and practices. Next slide, please. Okay, the latest Green Public Procurement Strategy and Action Plan, which was produced by the government, has a number of objectives. So these are to enhance GPP as a key tool in helping transition to circular economy, to ensure that GPP is a core and integral component of the public procurement process, to set out measures to ensure that all procurement using public funds, include green criteria where possible, to support further development of GPP criteria and enhance GPP knowledge and expertise through training, to facilitate participation in international collective efforts to use GPP as a lever for sustainable production and consumption. So I suppose CPROM project included there. And to support market conditions needed to deliver sustainable and innovative solutions to GPP. And this is really important in terms of, getting the market ready, helping suppliers to be ready, and market readiness. And I've linked that document there for you to look at if you want to do that. Next slide, please. Okay, so the strategy has, in theory, this implementation mandate for all public sector purchases from now on. And the first is a needs assessment. So this is really to assess, do you need to buy it at all? Is it necessary? Could you borrow it from somebody? Could you share it with a different department? Number two, if you do decide to buy something, then you need to insert GPP criteria. And the third is to comply or explain, as Jonas was talking about in Spain and it was in Netherlands. This is also a requirement there. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I think we skipped one there, which was the can you just go back one? Thanks so much, Nuria. Yeah. No, just one forward. Great, thank you. GPP guidance has been produced by the EPA, so there's been a number of reports, 3. But it sets out general guidance, first of all, but also it focuses in on 11 priority sectors, and I've listed them here. The newest one is furniture, but there's like cleaning, food and catering services, and so on. And again, I have the full document linked there for anybody who wants to look at it afterwards. So next slide, please. So here I'm just taking a little bit of a deeper dive here. We just had a peek at the cleaning products and services. But firstly, just to say that the criteria, the GPP criteria, can be included in a number of places along the tender process, if you like. So firstly, when defining the subject matter of the contract in exclusion grounds and selection criteria. So as a technical specification, as a qualitative award criteria, in the application of life cycle costing, or in contract performance clauses. So this means that green criteria can be put in any of these places, and they can be, combined in different ways. Just looking very briefly at the cleaning products and services criteria, the sort of things that are in there would be things like the use of energy efficient vacuum cleaners, training of staff, the proper concentrations of cleaning detergents, the use of eco-labeled cleaning products, things like that. Next slide, please. Okay, so the EPA have been integral in both producing and rolling out training for public sector and for suppliers as well, which is really important that we don't forget that it's also the market and suppliers have to be trained up on this, have to be skilled up. So in between 2020 and 2022, The EPA produced online training. There were GPP information workshops. They produced a number of case studies, and there is further training planned this year and next year. They've also produced a really nice guide for suppliers. It's very, very simple, but it goes through GPP principles and criteria. It explains what to expect in tenders, and it explains how to actually prepare to deliver goods using green public procurement criteria. Next slide, please. The Office of Government Procurement are currently working on a public procurement strategy roadmap. They're in the middle of it. It won't be actually done until next year, but they are integrating green public procurement into this as much as they can, to in the hopes to just normalize it and make it, you know, just something we do every day, which we're not doing at the moment. So next slide, please. And the Office of Government Procurement also have this really useful search tool where you can, if you're buying whatever you're buying. I was playing around with it, and I put coffee in, because we all need coffee. And when you put this in, it gives you different types of GPP criteria that you can use in your tender to buy your coffee. So it gives you options. There, next slide, please. So how is it going? Well, the EPA report every year, and we can see the last data we have is for 2022, but we can see that during 2022, in a total spend of 922 million, so these are this is money that's spent on in-scope contracts, and they are all contracts over 25,000. So we can see of that spend, 310 million actually included green criteria. So that was around a third, 34% of the spending. But if we look at the actual contracts, it was 29% of the actual contracts. So we are getting there. Next slide, please. Okay, so our challenges, and I think we're probably all aware of the challenges. The challenges in using GPP include, and these come from Greenville, who are a consulting company on GPP, who you may or may not have heard of. We use them a lot in Dublin City Council and in the public service in Ireland generally. And they say that the challenges are concerns about cost, concerns about product and service availability, concerns about market readiness. So this is really all about market readiness there. Concerns about criteria complexity and or possible legal issues, and also confidence and capacity of public sector buyers to navigate procurement rules and incorporate GPP. So that's where training comes in, and kind of hand-holding and the guidance and the criteria sets. A couple of weeks ago, I was actually chairing a really nice panel on green public procurement, and we had people from Greenville, we had people from the department, from the Office of Government Procurement, and also from some really big buyers. And the takeaways from that were that practical actions will be able to, sorry, trying to get through this really fast, that there are some practical actions for working together on this between the public service and suppliers. And these are effective engagement between buyers and suppliers, that's really, really helpful. GPP reporting is key to understanding what's actually happening in the market and how we can improve it. For suppliers, things like tracking and communicating sustainability actions will actually help them win tenders. So really how they communicate what they're doing, communicate how they can supply goods or services in a sustainable way will help them with tenders. And also for suppliers, they should be urged to seek clarification during the tender process if needed. So to ask questions and ask as many questions as they need to. Next slide, please. So this is just an example of a really new tender that's being produced in Dublin City Council, which is where I actually work. And I'll just give you a little bit of context about this. So basically, the international second-hand clothes markets have collapsed, and COVID caused a lot of disruption as well in terms of collecting textiles and clothes. And our contract expired. So this meant that at the moment we have lots and lots of second-hand clothes in warehouses in Dublin. Our bring banks are overflowing. They're not being serviced as well as they should, and it's actually a big issue for us at the moment. And of course, I suppose all this stems from our overconsumption of textiles and clothes. Next slide, please. And I suppose the bigger context is that we certainly don't want any of our secondhand clothes to be polluting Ghana or rivers and beaches and out in Africa and just being, dumped places. Next slide, please. So the tender basics are that this tender was to provide provision of services for the collection and processing of textiles for reuse or recycling. There would be 40 tonnes per month collected from 34 collection sites and occasional pop-up collections. It's a new tender. It's a single party framework, but there are 2 lots, and I'll go into that in a moment. There's lot 1, which is collection from 4 city districts, 27 collection sites, and lot 2, which is a collection from the remaining city district, which is 7 collection sites. So the service requirements are collection of clothes, cleaning of clothes banks and surrounding area, reporting weights and photos. It's really, really important, the reporting bit, and also really important to have a verifiable audit trail. So I suppose these 2 last requirements are really the ones where we can start using GPP criteria on this. Okay, next slide, please. So, sorry, I'm over time now, so I'm just going to fly through this. Okay, so the I suppose green criteria part of this is that the tenderer were asked how they would ensure that the textiles are collected in a way that creates a new low carbon Dublin economy, and also how they will assess the ethics of the organisations to which the textiles are being sold and reused. Next slide. So they're also asking for reporting and audit trail, and the important things here are the details of percentages of textiles typically sold for reuse. So to get those figures, the details of how those items are repurposed must be submitted. So it's quite detailed that the materials should only be marketed and transported to reputable and ethical recycling outlets, and the details of the markets to which the textiles are exported, including the breakdown of resale and repurposing and disposal of the items. Next one, please. Yeah, we can skip this. I think I just want to show there that cost has a very low weighting, whereas quality and being able to answer those GPP criteria are actually more important. Next slide, please. So lot 2, there was a special lot which is being reserved for sheltered workshops. So I suppose this is the social clause part, and here the organizations have to prove that they are actually sheltered workshops and they do have a social mission. Next slide, please. And that's just giving you the breakdown. Cost is sort of more important there than it is in lot 1, but you still can see that the quality and the reporting and the social clause bit is more important than cost. Okay, I think that's me. Thank you so much for listening. I realize I flew through that, so I'm really happy to take any clarification questions.
Thank you, Joanna, for your presentation. Thanks a lot. So now we will move to the Q&A session. So we see that the European Commission is preparing different minimum requirements through sectoral legislation. And there are also many regulations that already refer to public procurement. So how do you think the European Commission could best align all these regulations and implementing acts that are coming to make it best accessible to public authorities, and how these are going to be transposed into member states. I don't know, Evelyn or Jonas, if you have any inputs on this point.
Jonas, maybe you can go first. Yeah, then I'll follow you.
Okay. So you hopefully say, well, I agree with Jonas. That would be great. Yeah, considering the question of the European Commission and the criteria, my first advice would first and foremost be, well, don't overdo it. We get a lot of responses already from governments, not only based on public procurement, but in general, that the amount of regulatory frameworks, the amount of provisions that have to guide this transition forward towards circularity, towards climate neutrality, it's already a lot. It's already a lot of process. So if you want to make public procurement a little bit more flexible, more easygoing, more focused, and more focused on circularity, on cooperation, on that sustainability idea, I would say don't overdo it. Make sure that your ground rules are there. Make sure that you make very clear what your ambitions are. And then the discussion pops up again, how obligatory does it have to be? In my opinion, of course, I really like that nudging perspective that we say, okay, go for that kind of thing. And if you really want to derivate from it, well, okay, no problem, but motivate. I think that is a possible way forward. If you're going to make everything or put everything into regulation, into legislation, and it's very weird to hear that from a lawyer, of course, but if you're going to put everything in regulations, I don't think that is the best way forward. You need the flexibility because it's so diverse, the way that public procurement practices are happening today in Europe, I would say.
Okay. Evelyn, do you want to add on this?
Yes, thank you. So maybe coming back to you, Jonas, I'm not sure if I 100% agree, so please allow me some leeway. Okay. I do feel some awareness or urgency in order to really do something to stimulate change, and I think the European Commission can play a really intricate part in establishing a new level of product requirements, right? So I think it's great that they do that, and please be as ambitious as you can. That would be my take on that. But I think what public buyers and especially the market really needs is somebody to set a standard. So if we look at the environmental cost indicator, that's a big thing in the Netherlands. That's a process in which we use to assess and also use as award criteria for big projects, works. And everybody's sort of searching for that minimum standard or that target number or goal. And you see a lot of governments really struggling with that level of ambition. And I think if you have like that's what we do in the Netherlands, at least, this bronze, silver, gold standard. I think it really aligns with what Jonas is talking about. Then you have a set of rules, and the front runners can use the gold standards, and the more peloton or people who are maybe not as ambitious can use the bronze standard. And I think that would be really useful to have that as a way forward, because I feel that it can also help authorities not trying to work it out themselves, but then at least they have this set of rules and standards and they just apply it, which makes it easier than I think the set that we have now, where you see that it's also primarily based on the maybe project specific people who are working on it, and maybe not really embodied in the policy or in the activities of the organization. So I think a little coercion is needed and can help, but do it in a smart way. So make a standard set of criteria or set norms or really try to impose it a bit more. And that's why I think, coming back to your question about the procurement directive, there are a lot of tools in the toolbox already. So we need to make better use of them instead of trying to find new ones. I think that search for new things and new holy grails is not the best way forward. But I'm not quite sure, Joanna, what do you think?
Well, I can say that I agree with Evelyn. So it's the other way around. No, I completely agree. It's making sure that the front runners can go along and be front runners, and also accompanying, making sure that the other ones are also will have the tools and the instruments there with best practices, with setting a standard that can help them move forward. And that's exactly the point that I was trying to make, but you put it a little bit more eloquently. So thank you for that.
Maybe a question on tools, because Jonas mentioned the GRO, but then we also see that there are others like the CO2 performance ladder, BREEAM. There are many tools that can be used. Do you think the European Commission should define kind of a standard rule or like one rule for all, so that it can be commonly used? And what do you think about this?
There are a lot of tools out there already, also specified to the various member states. I think it can be a very good idea to look at it from a European perspective, take the best ones from all the member states and really push them forward as some kind of best practice or things to consider. Then again, if you say, well, we want to make it obligatory, you get the same discussion, of course, as we had earlier on. For us in Flanders, more specifically the GRO. But then again, it also depends on the contract that you're trying to get out in the open. It also has to be aligned to the ambitions of the project. What are we talking about? Is it a big project? Is it a smaller project? We can throw tools at every possible project that is there, but it has to be aligned. I think it resonates with what Evelyn said. It has to apply to the scope of the project, but also the scope of the public buyer, the contracting authority, the resources he or she has, and the time they're able to invest in it, I would say. But if we can get the best practices from all the European member states and European Commission or European Union as a whole can push that forward, I think everybody has to gain from it, because then again, you get an optimal use of the tools and the instruments that are already there right now in regulation and in soft law.
Yes, and I also think that the European Commission is working on it, right? So especially if you look at works, then you can see that there are important tooling is coming up, and also the European Commission is trying to harmonize the way we look at the LCAs or the ECIs as a way of really measuring the environmental impact. And I think that's coming as well through the whole life carbon approach for buildings and also everything we do in infrastructure. So that's coming. And we know this, but it's still purely focused on CO2 emissions. So that's, I think, scope-wise, a thing to look at. Because, of course, when you look at circularity, CO2 is only a very small indicator of what we try to reach.
Yeah, maybe I was linking to this topic. I was thinking about the life cycle cost, because this is explicit in the public procurement directive. However, the Commission only defined 5 life cycle cost methodologies for specific products. I don't know if you think the way forward should be that the Commission should continue developing life cycle cost methodologies for other products, so that it can be easily used by contracting authorities. And then I don't know, what do you think about this? If you have any comment on this.
Now you can start, Evelyn, if you want.
Okay, that's good. So yeah, if you see where we are now with the introduction of the life cycle award criteria, I think it's too complicated for people to actually use in procurement, right? And that's why I touched upon the life cycle analysis and, of course, also the environmental cost indicator, because these are all basically the same tools where we also look at the total cost of ownership and the life expectancy. So I think from the Netherlands point of view, we don't really use it as a way of issuing tenders, but it's incorporated in an award criteria because we look at the environmental costs and we allow all companies to maybe write the best brief or make the best offer that they can based on that. So I think, yeah, that's what I see in the Netherlands.
If I can add to that very quickly, because I do agree with what Evelyn said. The big advantage of lifecycle costing, of course, is that it generates an objective result. It's just you put something in it, it generates some kind of score, and then from a contracting authority, it's very easy, it's very straightforward, it's very objective to just say, okay, the lifecycle cost of this product or this service or this construction work is better than the other one. So that makes it a very relevant option when you consider circularity, when you consider sustainability options, although the methods are not on point right now and they should be further developed. There is a lot of discussion. What do you put in? What can you cut off, for example? So that makes it very difficult, again, to generate the most objective score. On the other hand, and that's also what I put forward slightly already in my presentation, is the fact that an emphasis can also be placed, and maybe should also be placed, on qualitative criteria when you talk about circularity aspects in public procurement. I want to give an example. There is a subdivision of the province of Antwerp in Belgium, Kamp C, and they are really working on getting circularity into the fields, into their projects, into their activities, and they're really interested in the public procurement side of it. And when they've now done two specific construction projects. One was just a new office building, and one is a renovation of an existing building. And they told me in the discussions that we had, is that they really like to look for their new best friend when they look for a contractor or an architect. And you cannot do that when you solely focus on numbers and data and life cycle costing. You can only do that if you also focus on qualitative criteria. So that social aspect, that cooperative aspect of circularity, that makes it a systemic shift. You can only get that when you focus on best price quality ratio and much less on life cycle costing. Of course, you include a subjective element in the mix then, but we have a lot of experience to make that as objective as possible and make sure that we look at the award criteria in the most objective way, even if it has a qualitative aspect.
Thank you, Jonas. Maybe, Joanna, do you want to comment on this? Because you also explained this case in Ireland.
Yeah, just as Jonas was talking there, I kind of wanted to ask a question. Do you think there's because this was something that was spoken about on that panel that I chaired a few weeks ago as well. Do you think there's a tension there between the need for that social contact or for those discussions to happen, that sort of collaboration, with the objectivity that's required in a tender, and say through e-tenders, and the rules are very, very strict, and if someone asks you a question you have to answer everybody, which is fine, that's all very fine, but and it's only right, but are we missing something in that you can't actually have a phone conversation with somebody or with the supplier? You can't clarify something in that way. And I'm wondering, is there a way to balance those two requirements?
That's a very good question. when I talk with people in practice, you can indeed see that they are struggling with that because they want to be open, they want to be transparent, they want to collaborate, but it's very difficult to put that in a very formal procedure. Or you can pick the procedure, of course, that have that negotiation elements in them, but then the procedures maybe take a little bit longer, and they want to move forward. They want to start building. They want to start getting the services that they ask for. One possible route that people can take, and that we actually try to advise contracting authorities as well, is to focus a little bit more on that preparation aspect, that market consultation, market information side of things, because there the regulatory burden is still a little bit lower. You can actually make the phone calls there, make sure that you are well informed, that you ask the market, is this a good idea? Would this budget be sufficient? These are things that you can really go into there to define the scope of your project, the ambitions of your project, and then again, of course, you can put it in that formal procurement procedures. But there needs to be a connection between them in order to establish that collaboration, that spirit of social solidarity, sustainability. It has to be there from the beginning. It has to be implemented in the scope and the ambitions of the project. And then when you really have a good preparation and you know what the market can deliver and what you can ask, then the procurement itself can also be a little bit smoother, and you can focus as well on the elements that can be relevant in the execution phase when focusing again on collaborative efforts. And there are specific ideas or procedures in place that can help, of course. For example, in the Netherlands, you have the so-called bouwteam formula. Maybe Evelien can dive a little bit deeper into that, where you really focus on collaborative efforts from the start of the project, in this case construction projects, in order to avoid risks or any conflicts that might arise later on in the trajectory. So it is possible, but it's also it demands some creativity.
Yeah, and I suppose that's something that probably needs to be communicated as well, because people probably say, "Oh, I think you can do it, but maybe what if I do it wrong, or what if I get in trouble because I've done it wrong?" So they kind of step back from it, and they're almost afraid to try it in case, because I suppose it's a very high stakes thing doing a procurement if you get it wrong.
Well,
really,
Yeah, I mostly give the advice, and I know it's a little bit too easy, but still, if you focus on the principles that are there, if you focus on non-discrimination, transparency, be transparent, and be proportionate in what you ask, there's already a lot of things that are actually easy to accomplish when you talk about public procurement. So if you want to focus on collaboration, be transparent about it, be proportionate, and focus on non-discrimination, and then not a lot can go wrong, I think.
Yes, and maybe just adding some things from me. So I think that also looking at the bronze, silver, gold standard, it translates into to emissions, right? So you see a lot of runners really using the process of innovation partnership and really trying to co-create with the every market player when that needs to happen, right? So we do see that a lot, and maybe. At least in Dutch procedures, there is a lot of communication, and there are easy ways to mitigate circumstances that you're discussing by just really being upfront about it and sharing documents about what you've discussed, right? So that's, I think, one point that I try to make. But I think when you look at the not so much front runner or the rest of the group, they just want a simple procedure with no margin of error. So there maybe the discussion is not really needed in order to really use or make a big step forward. So they can use a normal procedure with the work that the front runners have done already. And it really depends, I think, also about what you're trying to purchase, because of course buying paper really is different from setting up a new building for your municipality to work in. So it's not set in stone, but I think generally for the more complicated things, I think in the Netherlands, partnerships or are implemented in the procurement procedures that we have, and it works fine. We could do it a bit more, and the collaboration could be more equal. I think that's at least what I'm trying to strive towards. But it's in place and it works. But maybe we need to be less afraid of using it. If we look at the risk that there are and how can we introduce mitigating circumstances, I think that would be the dialogue that we should all strive towards.
I see there's also a question in the chat from Jay. Jay, maybe you can speak up.
Yeah, so I'm sorry for bringing this question in something webinar that is focusing mostly on the legal uncertainties of procurement, but this has been going on for some time in my head, so I thought I will just ask, how do you, at the national level, really measure the progress of circular procurement? Are there any interesting things that can be taken to the EU level and maybe changed? That's my question. Thank you.
I think the honest question is we don't really know. So I'm working with one municipality, and we all have these great goals towards 2030 and 2050 about reducing material use. And what you see is that we put measures in place, or we have ambitions in tendering procedures, but it's really difficult to try to monitor and actually report on the results that specific procurement procedure or work really delivers on. So I think that's something that we should be working on, and what I'm working with, at least with the front runners here in the Netherlands, they all are really serious about it. So we have certain investigations looking at the material flows through the cities and measuring impact, measuring CO2 emissions, and trying to find a reduction there. But I mean, on the city level, I think the amount of information that's available is still very leaves a lot to be desired for, but we are working on it, and we also see that it's important. But on the other hand, we have numerous reports about the state of the world, as we see, and we see that the trend is going up and not down. So maybe we just need to take big steps forward, and maybe not exactly know how much we gain from a circularity point, but at least it's something, and that was better than we did before, right? So that's also a big step.
If I can add to that maybe real quick, because, well, we're running out of time. We here in Belgium and Flanders are, to the best of my knowledge, are not necessarily tracking how circular our public procurement practices are. What we are doing, and that's within the scope of the Circular Economy Center that I'm also a part of, there are other researchers, real researchers, I'm just a simple lawyer, of course, working on monitoring the circularity in Flanders based on different parameters. And there you can see that the chosen indicators are really important as well. I saw that you mentioned in your post the circular material use rate, which is in fact very interesting. But if I understood it correctly, it's still mostly focused on, well, recycled content kind of things, which is, of course, and well, that bugs me a lot. Recycling is not circularity. And it's, of course, that's not the fault of you, that's not the fault of the European Union, because it's very difficult to get data on what is reused or what is prevented in an even better world. So we have to start somewhere. So if we start monitoring it better, if we start using the data better, we also have to make sure that the data that we're using is actually circular and not necessarily only focused on recycling alone. Although that is, I completely understand that is the focus right now. But if you want to take the steps forward, like Evelien said, we also have to make sure that the data and the indicators are also getting better and improving in that regard.
Thank you, Jonas. So there is, maybe we can just address the last question in the chat from Gabriela. So how to define regional criteria and procedures, local products in a catering contract, for for example, and not to be sanctioned in a EU-funded project for discriminatory criteria set in Annex Commission decision at number 10. So what do you think about this issue with local producers?
I think it's a great question. I want to pop in first because I had a very interesting discussion with another professor at our faculty who is really focused on public procurement practices. And we were actually talking about, well, like I said a few minutes ago, if you use the principles on equality, non-discriminatory, transparency, and proportionality, you already can get a lot of things done. But this question really points to a specific problem, which is, of course, if you talk about circularity, you talk about maybe shorter supply chains, and you want to be more local. And right now, within the case law, the principles that we're using are, by case law, interpreted in a very broad way. A product from Belgium is the same or is equal to a product from Greece, for example. But is that the case if we look at it from a circularity perspective? And I have nothing against products from Greece, of course. So that raises a very fundamental question that can be raised when revising the directives and also would be relevant in the new geopolitical context that we're in right now, where you give the possibility or really say, okay, this is what we mean with non-discriminatory measures. This is what we mean with equality. And there you can motivate that a product from Belgium, the Netherlands, Ireland is not necessarily the same as a product from Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, you name it. If it relates again, or if it's relevant for the project, if it's relevant for the circularity ambitions that you are aiming for. So it's a very interesting discussion. I don't know if it's a good idea, of course, but it's something that we're thinking about, and it's something to consider, to really on a fundamental level rethink the principles that are now the fundamentals of public procurement law. But I'm still thinking about it.
Thanks a lot, Jonas. This is an event that we are organizing on 11 and 12 of June together with Circular Friesland and ACR Plus. Will take place during the Circular Summit Friesland 2025 and the Netherlands. And there will be a parallel session on circular procurement where we will have some insights, and we will bring also the outcomes of the discussion today there to continue all the discussion on this topic. And then the day before we will have a study visit to set the grounds for the parallel session on circular procurement. It will be a circular building. So we welcome all of you to join. And with that, I would like to say thank you to all of you, to the speakers, for all your presentations and your insights. It was very interesting and timely discussions in view of the revision of the public procurement directives also. So thank you very much and see you soon.